it's crazy, but it's
You're watching Channel Z, the world's leading zombie apocalypse channel, broadcasting live from Studio Z.
Makes me act the way I do.
Welcome to Undead Live, reporting from the front lines of the zombie apocalypse. We have your back morning, noon, or night, whether you're dead, undead, recently deceased, or fully alive. We have the apocalypse covered. I'm Athena Actipus.
And I'm Dave Lundberg-Kenrick.
And welcome to the 2022 Zombie Apocalypse Medicine Meeting.
Woo!
We are beyond excited to have you all here.
The apocalypse is over. We all made it through. Everyone survived. Everyone who's here now is perfectly safe.
And we've completely secured the studio. I know, we were worried a little bit in the lead up that maybe we had a zombie problem in the studio, but there's no zombies, there's no threats. Everything is 100% safe. And we have our live studio audience here with us. Let's see that. Let's see the studio.
Yeah,
let's see our live
on
audience on the Z-Cam.
So.
Completely safe here in the studio, and we are just excited to be live.
Okay. So
no.
What?
Oh no. Oh no.
Did he get attacked?
What happened to our Z-Cam?
Are you okay?
Oh
Okay.
no. Oh no. What's going on? Oh no.
All right, I think we lost our Z-Cam.
All right, well, let's get back on the site. I think it's fine now, though. I think it.
Yeah, that was a one-off thing.
Yeah, really. That was just a. Sometimes it's hard to get every single last zombie, but now that we've gotten that last
safe.
One, everything
Perfectly
is perfectly.
We're really sorry. We really appreciate the sacrifice Otacon, our Z-Cam operator, made for the show.
Thank you.
But now it's safe. So.
Now we are definitely safe. All right. Well, we're here today, part of ZAM 2022. We have a really exciting zombie-free meeting.
We do.
Coming up.
It's going to be so great. We're going to be talking about zombies, drugs, and rock and roll.
We will. And psychedelics, addiction, medicine, entrainment. So many exciting topics.
Festivals, gatherings, cults.
Yeah.
Yes.
We are going to talk about cults.
How they can all help us through the apocalypse. So.
Yeah. I don't know about the cults part. I think maybe, we should reconsider how much cults have seemingly infiltrated already what's been going on here.
I think we need more cults, really. I think that's the truth. The safety lies in groups. And what better group could you have than joining, say, my cult?
Dave, please don't try to recruit at this meeting for your cult.
My cult is a good idea. People should join it. It's a cult of chaos, rising up and causing chaos. Those are the things that keep us from being zombies.
Well, why don't we just talk about the meeting? So
okay, we have a great
meeting coming up. Today we're going to have arts, crafts, cults maybe a little bit, and not to mention irresistible reggae beats curated by Zombified Media's own Mzilikazi Koné. And we'll also have an interactive workshop with Tamas David-Barrett on the natural history of festivals.
That's right. Tomorrow, we're going to have Shane Moss and Danielle Sobolski discussing whether or not we should party our way through the apocalypse. And that should be a lot of fun. Oh, and Julie Sullivan-Brace with the Bluegrass Festival.
Yeah, so. Julie Sullivan-Brace, who started the Pickin' in the Pines Bluegrass Festival in Flagstaff, is coming down here to pick her way through all of our brains, I think.
Yeah.
So that's going to be super exciting. And Then on Sunday, we're going to have both Saturday and Sunday, we're going to have lots of other exciting events. We'll talk more about those kind of as our week
That's
unfolds.
right. And lots of people joining my cult.
Yeah, right. Or not. Or maybe we'll try to keep it professional here and not bring your cult in to our professional broadcast.
Professionalism is what we're pushing against.
Dave, just please do not use the show to recruit cult members.
Look, cults, that having secret languages, these sorts of things, they help us come together. You know, that's what today's show is all about.
Dave, cults zombify us.
No way. They don't. They make us human.
They take over our brains.
They give us secret languages. They give us groups. I think it's a very human thing. I think everyone should join our cult.
Well, so. I mean, yeah, I think that they do definitely create some sort of a hive mind. Maybe sometimes they can be good, but maybe we should bring in some other voices here. What do you think?
I think so. I mean, I think we have a lot of experts that have a lot of useful information on how to start a cult, sort of different rituals like knitting and collaging and communal art and so creativity.
You just looking for knowledge to bring to your cult, Dave?
All right, look, full disclosure. Eric and I both have started cults, and I feel like hers is a little ahead of mine. She was passing notes in the pre-production meeting, and I think she was getting people to sign up for her cult, okay? And so I think we need my cult that Neil has joined. Oh, good, and Aaron is going to join. We need a little more branding, you know? We might need some collages. We might need some special knit cult sweaters. So
all right. Well, Dave, as long as you're not trying to recruit guests on the show while we're live, I think it should be fine. So
no promises.
So, well, why don't we bring on our first guest today?
Our first guest is a favorite, right? It's Mzilikazi
Koné, Zombified own.
Right on. Mzilikazi. Oh, let me not be zombified by the chair.
Yeah.
Please come on in.
Thank you.
So good to see you.
Hi. Hello.
Great to see you. Join my cult.
I don't know about joining any cult today, everybody, but I'll think about it.
It's a good cult.
I'll think about it. Hi.
Hey,
So good to be here.
Hello.
So you were almost like caught up in, I believe there's some zombie apocalypses going on outside of the walls here, even though it's entirely safe.
That's
here
right.
in the studio.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm hailing from California. I intended to be here yesterday, but the zombies totally attacked. I mean, it was pandemonium at the airport, but it was a lot safer this morning when I arrived, and I made it safely, which was great. So I'm so glad to be here.
Excellent. Well, I'm sorry that so much crazy stuff happened to you on your way here to the studio, but now that you're here, you can be assured it's
Safety.
completely
Totally
safe.
safe.
Everything.
Maybe I'll let my guard
completely
down
safe.
a little bit. maybe.
Well, it's amazing to have you here. So, Ms. Mzilikazi, I understand that in addition to your role as the host of Zombie History on Channel Z, that you also do some other work in academia. Is this correct?
I do. I'm a professor. I write. I'm a scholar, and of course, there are other things besides what we do for our careers, like the things that we make. Right? I feel like that's part of what adds some humanity to my life by getting to like play and create stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you create?
Well, I like to make collages. And so for those who don't know, collage, actually, maybe you might remember as a kid. I think we did that more often as a kid, where you have papers and glue and magazines and you cut them all up and put them together, right? It's back to the basics of cutting and pasting. Now, collages are pretty, in my opinion, pretty magical things, right? It's like you are creating a whole new vision and a whole new picture out of other pictures, right? So they've created something, but you're creating something new with some magazine picture or some ad to create a new piece of art. And that's what I love about that.
So how did you get into collaging?
Well, to be honest, I've used collaging a lot in my classes with my students. So oftentimes we make zines. And part of that is opening up the floor for everybody, especially the students, to have some creativity and autonomy and creating something new and awesome. I just love that, for academia, we're thinking so often, or we're thinking, right? That's the main thing. We're thinking, and unless you have a lab, you're doing in a lab. But for a lot of us,
Yeah, if we have a lab, we're not thinking.
well,
we're just doing.
well, maybe the combination of things of thinking and doing at the lab.
Absolutely.
But when you are, I think, collaging and you're adding this additional tactile thing, I think it adds something really rich to our lives because you get your hands in it. You're really touching and cutting and pasting, and I think that's really valuable. So I love doing that. I mean, collage for the new year, for example. Like, what do you want your new year to look like? So maybe create a collage so that you can envision it first.
I like that because then you're taking stuff that you're looking for inspiration,
That's true.
and then you're combining it.
That's
Can,
right.
can I ask for anybody who doesn't know, what do you teach?
I teach political science
Okay.
And working on ethnic studies and social justice studies at my college.
So you're having the political science students make collages?
Yeah, I often do. I mean, I've had political science students do it, ethnic studies students. I will try it in any kind of class. I find that some folks might be put off at first. They're like, what am I? I'm a college student. You're cutting and pasting. I'm not in kindergarten. But that's usually the before thought. Usually afterwards, a sense of like, wow, I created something new. I made something new. And I think that's part of what's important for students like political science students, right? As an example. The thing is, a lot of people want to change the world, right? They're like, I don't like the way the world is. There's zombies everywhere. I don't like this. But it's hard to know what kind of world you want before you can actually imagine it. And creating a collage helps you to envision the new world that you want to see.
So it can really be both an envisioning force and kind of a de-zombifying force, it sounds like you're saying.
Truly. Yeah, you're trying to manifest and create something new. And heck, I'd love to manifest a world without zombies, right? So in my collage, you won't find a lot of zombies. Or if you do, you find people resisting zombification, right? So that we can find the power to fight back and win.
Well, they're also sort of raising the dead, right? And reassigning. You've got these pictures that already exist, and then they're bringing them and giving them new life.
That's true.
Essentially.
That's true.
Are there any examples from like things that students have done in your class that you were like, whoa, like,
Really all the time. I mean, a zine project, a zine is a self-made magazine, right? So students write articles, they create art, whether it be poetry, collage, and so forth, and they put it together and create this magazine. And usually students are like, I thought this was good. Well, it was hard. It's not easy, but I find that students are so proud of the work that they create. And I have seen incredible art. I've seen 3D art popping off of the page, you know, like if you imagine those books we used to make as kids that had the little pop outs. I've seen that. Right. So it's pretty incredible when you allow the space for creativity and art because people will surprise you.
That's wonderful. Well, so how do you then, kind of within a context where we have lots of systems and rules and, things have to sort of work within these existing structures, how do you make space for things like collaging? Or, is there a way for them to then sort of spring forth outside of just where they began and affect the rest of the world?
Sure. Well, that's my goal, is that with doing a project like this, if you can make it yourself, then what's to say you can't make some other change, right? A zine or a collage is really just the first step. So
you could start a whole television station.
Absolutely. I've had students create podcasts and create other ways that they are engaging with the world and sharing with the world, which is incredible, right? You got to have a sense of that the change is possible, and it starts, or it can start anyhow, with just cutting out pictures and pasting them on a page.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I have a question I want to ask, although I know I realized I asked Neil this question last time. What is your take on Campbell's soup on a Van Gogh as a collage?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, remember that the Van Gogh was protected by glass, and that we are talking about it because they took that action. Okay, we are in a crisis state, and the more we act like we're not in a crisis, the bigger the crisis will get. So truly, I'm actually in support of those actions because we're beyond the tipping point, and we got to do something. So if attention and discussion is being had about climate change as a result of that action, I'm here for it. Right? We need more of that.
So now can I ask sort of in a global sense? I
Sure.
think a big question for this week, right, was we're talking about festivals and how music can zombify and de-zombify us and how art can zombify and de-zombify us. What do you think is the best way? Because when you're taking existing things like existing art and you're making something new or you're making a new statement, what is the best way to balance sort of both tradition and adding your own voice?
Oh, that's a great question. When you asked that question, really the thing that came to mind to me was hip hop and hip hop culture, right? Hip hop is known for using this thing called a sample, right? Something from another song. So you take something from a song that's already been made and you add it to a new song. And all of a sudden you've got a whole new project with the influences from the old. So I'm here for it, right? I mean, everything doesn't have to be, I got to build the wheel first. No, there's wheels out there. Like, how can we use that, like the magazines for the collage or the earlier sample, right, in the track to build something new? I think that's beautiful, right? I mean, it's beautiful to have something original, but to make something old new again, I think there's a lot of beauty to that.
Nice. So,
Yeah. Wonderful.
yeah.
Well, I think that this is a great opportunity for us to invite our next guest to join us, Tamas David-Barrett. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
So, Tamas, did anything bizarre happen to you on the way here?
Well, apart from the British Prime Minister having resigned today, woke up and suddenly yet another one's gone. So the British politics is being zombified fully. But
I didn't even know that, to be honest. I showed up and didn't read
well,
the
there's
news,
so many these days. That
Yeah.
you don't-
If
so
you're
don't pay
running a
attention.
news show, you don't need
Yeah,
to read
yeah.
the
You don't need to
news.
know what's happening in the
No,
world.
yeah, you have a
So-
script, so.
Well, I guess I'm finding out about it live, right, on the news.
That's
so.
right.
But it's great to have you with us. And
Thank
so,
you so much.
Yeah. So, Tamas, you study humans and collective behavior
Yeah.
and complexity and how we even manage to exist as these humans that we are. So, what's your take on the role of creativity in human collective behavior?
Creativity, the kind of creativity that we are doing here. Is that
Sure.
what you so thinking through what would happen to us in a particular kind of crisis? It's almost like dreaming, no? Like a collective dreaming. So when we dream, we play through scenarios in our heads that could happen to us. So when I became a father, 19 years ago, sorry, 19 and then 16, I started to have these really wild dreams of the kids getting hurt. This is something they don't tell you about when you're about to be a parent, yeah? That suddenly all kind of really awful things happen to your kids. In your dream, you get ready. In a way, this is your amazing conference here, and this whole movement that you created. In a way, this is thinking through what would happen to society in a particular situation, sandboxing. So this is an act of creativity. And it's amazing how the way you are organizing it, that you create a community at the same time, is the way to trigger such communal dreaming through a particular scenario. So we're engaging with something very deep and human here. So, and it's wonderful.
And it often feels very dreamlike. I feel like we're always running late, and I'm always running late in my dreams. And so,
Right.
I think we capture that
Right.
essence. That feeling of my kids getting on a different airplane, for me,
Yeah.
which I always have dreams about.
Which is
But,
funny because in a way we are thinking through for our own kids. So Mzilikazi, I'm so sorry.
All good.
I'm majorly jet lagged. You mentioned this problem of the biosphere collapsing around us, and we need to think through what we can do about it. Yeah, and the problem is that right now we don't know. Yeah, a very large part of it is that we haven't been able to organize ourselves into an effective collective action unit of 7.8 billion people. And if you think about it, it's really not trivial of how to do that. Yeah.
we also don't seem to have a lot of playgrounds for, and
Right.
I feel like for saving the earth, since we've only got the one,
Right.
we don't, because we're talking about sort of play and how play can help us
Right.
figure things out. But what are ways we can play with problems on a global scale?
Yeah, because we seem to be many of us are locked into this creative industry in white jackets. Yeah, being scientists, you wearing the tag of a scientist on you, And suddenly it's a hierarchical, structured place where the kind of play that you can do in art, that you can do in a metaverse game, is missing. Yeah, and this is in a way what I think this is what you're doing here. We're thinking through a bunch of different scenarios collectively, playfully, sandboxing it, and then having maybe some ideas of how to go about it.
Yeah, I think that's a good metaphor for what we're doing, right? And also thinking about, right, like you're saying, even playing with the sandbox itself, right? Playing with, because you're saying like with science we have this plan, and so yeah, I think hopefully. So what are some ways that scientists can play with their sandbox, right? Can play with the ways they do science?
But I think the first problem is that we haven't quite got, and sort of goes to our science, is that we haven't quite defined the problem in terms of collective action. So if you think about it, this is the first time in the history of humanity, and of course in the history of any other species on the planet, and as far as we know in the universe, that one species is able to create a social network for the whole planet. And it's very much because family sizes fell so much that we are shifting away from family social networks to friendship networks. Yeah? And friendship networks are very, very different from family social networks because kin networks are fairly set. So when you are born into a fairly fixed structure. Cultures vary of how they wire these, but that's it. Almost all of your social connections, not everybody, but almost all of them will be kin. Yeah? When family sizes fall, especially together with urbanization and migration, suddenly we replace the missing kin with friends, yeah, and that has none of this fixedness. It has a kind of flexibility with which we can suddenly think about this question of how to wire 7.8 billion people. Yeah? And it's a completely new question. So I think the first problem that we need to face of how to define the question, and then we can get, all right, so what is the right kind of sandbox or sequence of sandboxes that can be created to tackle that question somehow? No?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you want to jump in, Mzilikazi?
I just love this idea of that we need to play it out like in a sandbox. You've got to actually model it and try it somewhere. You don't just come up with an idea. It's not a film. You don't just come up with the idea and then save the world. Like you actually have to work at it.
Yeah. Amazing how much computer games and increasingly some new games in the metaverse, shifting maybe sometimes away from actual games, create a space for such sandboxing. Yeah, the more freedom there is in a game, the more you can mess around with this, and we don't regard it. From outside, we almost regard it as pointless. Yeah, but actually, we are playing with scenarios, and thus we are playing with possible solutions. Yeah, for instance, how to wire that many people, how to create collective action, how to generate reputation in these networks, how to act together. Yeah.
Tamas, for you, how does creativity manifest in your life?
In my own life?
Yeah.
Oh dear. Okay. So I was forbidden to sing or make music when I was a child. Only a few years ago, when I gone to a singing teacher, I sang to my kids secretly, and it's quite deep. I didn't expect to talk about it. And now I allow myself to engage with music a little bit, and that's when I'm sort of free, and I get to create, and it's sort of freed up my science as well, because I feel that this, that kind of creativeness that you can have in art, maybe you have it in collages as well. Do you find that in your creativity in collages, your science, your academic work responds to that pattern of creation?
I believe so. I mean, whether it be making collages or for me personally, it's well, in addition to that, is dancing, right? And I find that the movement of the body, the space to actually let go, I mean, it helps me be my true self. And my truest self is who I need to rely on to do my best work, be my best self. So yeah, I find it to be really central as well to have the space to just exist in my most true form, which is usually with some music on and dancing. So I identify.
Cool.
Yeah. So for you, there was a qualitative shift when creating music became part of your life?
Yes. So I always listened to music through my life. And then that was a change because it's different I think you play music. Yeah? So when you are responding to someone and it's a bit like dancing for the first time tango with your eyes closed. And you have this ability to, we are born with this ability of behavioral synchrony, where we do different things, but we become one unit. And not experience this in your body is a loss of humanity or lack of humanity. So I think for the first time, at least for me, when I experienced it, it was a revelation. Yeah, wow, you can do this. So I assume you find the superpower, no?
So how did you begin when you began? So you began singing? Was that how you got into performing? So
I don't perform.
But for your kids, you perform for your kids for a very select audience.
Yeah.
Well, that's me as well, right? Because I wasn't forbidden for playing music, but I always thought it was like this magical thing that I'd never understand. And I started trying to learn the piano, and slowly but surely it started to make sense to me, right? And so, but I'm thinking, what I was curious about was I guess actually, was it scary? Because I think, when you first started doing this thing that you'd never done before, or was it just like, I'm going for it and...
Singing to my kids, captured audience, yeah? They were falling asleep, yeah? So now they're 19 and 16, but, I actually was once in a situation, accidentally, when I accidentally sang a little bit in front of others. And so it's a long story, but that's what really happened. And that was complete utter panic until I gone back to the, put the muscles in the right place, forget about the whole thing. And then it just happens. Maybe it's a bit like dancing, but it just takes over, like you go, yeah? And
it's like a sense of, I find it to be a sense of freedom.
Yeah.
To be like,
yeah.
What they say, dance like nobody is watching or sing like nobody is, I suppose.
Yeah. But isn't it amazing when you do that with somebody else? And that creates this co-creation, instant co-creation.
Absolutely.
Yeah? Like a polyadic play with our own bodies. Adult polyadic play that sort of creates this space of coming up with new things. And innovation is not even creation, it just comes out of it. Yeah. There's a imagine. I mean, we can have all kind of tags on it, yeah. But
Well, and entrainment as well. So getting in sync with the other humans around, when you have the sort of inputs from other humans coming into your senses and you're synchronizing with them, then you get this collective entrainment that can be kind of dreamy. So we'll actually be hearing from Jessica Phillips Silver and Dante Pope on Sunday about this very topic of entrainment and how we're capable of this collective experience where we almost, I might say, become like a superorganism.
We become one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
I'm looking forward.
I'm just thinking we could become one. I mean, that comes up in reggae music, this sense of, and probably more music, this real sense of oneness and unity. I mean, what comes out so often in those spaces about we are one, right? And that we are celebrating unity, our einity, and coming together. I mean, it is central to the experience, the interconnectedness. I mean, I feel great dancing by myself, but it's a whole nother experience if there's other people around. It feels kind of, I don't know, ancient to rely on and to connect with other humans in that way through the movement of your body.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what can we expect in your not televised zombie history? Apologies to all of you who will only maybe catch some small clips of it that we will record. But We have a DJ edition of Zombie History this afternoon.
That's right. Very excited to have Professor David Himes join us as we have a sort of academic sound clash, and we play different reggae songs, and we'll talk about it because we're thinking about music broadly. And for this reggae session, thinking about music as a space for creativity and resistance, right? If we're fighting the zombies, we need the music to help us feel like, you know what? We can do it. And not only can we do it, but we can win. So we'll be playing different reggae jams. So we'll be rocking out, but then we'll also be talking about the meaning and the message behind the music.
And can we all sing along if we
I
want?
sure hope so.
All right.
At least I hope that you will feel free in your body and in the community to dance with one another.
All right, sounds good. Speaking of community, we have another guest. We've got Gwyneth Gordon. Shall we
We
bring
do.
her on?
Gwyneth, please. Applause. We're going to need Yeah, come in a little bit here. Thank you.
Let's come around.
Thank you for joining us. How was your trip to get here?
Well, I don't worry about it so much because I'm actually a zombie already. I'm an active member of the Stockinette Zombies at stockinettezombies.com. And this is a knitting group.
I told you it was a cult.
Yep. And I encourage other people to join because it's really rewarding.
Well, so Gwyneth, you're saying that you're actually a zombie. Because
Yes.
to me, you don't look like it. I thought we had secured the premises from zombies, but I mean, you don't seem so threatening to me.
Well, I know, but see, that's how you infect people is by not being threatening, right? If you're threatening, people run away. But if you just see like, oh, here, I'm going to gift you a hat, then, that's very non-threatening. And you don't realize that carries the zombie virus within that knitted garment.
So what does the virus say?
So it's really a type of collective consciousness. And, in particular, this pandemic spawned, I think, not just the COVID-19 virus, but also other variants of the zombie virus. And I think a lot of, that a certain amount of arts certainly came into that. My background is actually analytical chemistry. And so I've been thinking a lot about, I couldn't go in the lab. And what I hadn't always connected was how much creativity I have in the lab and how much designing experiments and working with my hands and doing measurements and carefully getting, that this actually requires a huge amount of creativity. And that was no longer an outlet for me when our labs were closed. And so I had previously been a knitter in the past. Moving to Arizona, I'd not done as much in part because, it's 115 degrees. There's not much need for knitted garments. But then I began to realize of this kind of artistic outlet. And in addition, I started in my academic work, I also ended up doing just by happenstance, a number of studies working particularly on keratin proteins. So one of the things is my background is isotope chemistry, and I work with a lot of anthropologists. So one of the things that we sometimes do is look at the structure and chemistry of wool to understand trade networks. So you can look at, for instance, the naturally occurring isotopes in wool, and you can understand the husbandry practices of sheep. You can also understand where they were raised. So for instance, we've just finished a large project on an absolutely gorgeous, now in this case, it's actually a feather cloak that was in Mexico and is currently at the Met. And they allowed us to analyze very small amounts of this feather material that's also then secured by wool to understand, were those birds raised locally or were they imported? Because there was a lot of trade networks to introduce parrots, for instance, into the southern U.S. So understanding, were those birds raised locally or were their feathers just being imported? You can start understanding a lot about what the relationship between different cultures were.
How old was the feather cloak?
So it's about 500 years old. Yeah,
So-
it's absolutely gorgeous. These multicolored parrot feathers.
So you can really look at the materials that are coming out of these societies and analyze their chemistry in order to understand things about their way of life and
Yes.
their environment that otherwise it might not be possible to tell.
Yes, and actually, I've also been working quite a bit on learning the difference between, for instance, keratin protein in hair versus keratin protein in wool. So I actually have some really large projects with the National Institute of Justice, because one of the other things it can do is hair is actually a sequential record of our travel, our life. It's a chemical history. And so I've been doing a lot of work in understanding how robust those chemical histories are. So you can use this, it's been used in anthropology a lot, but you can also use it in human rights cases. And so one of the questions we had is, well, how well preserved are these when they're exposed to water? And this particularly comes up because of, for instance, refugee crises. When people are crossing the Mediterranean, and things like that, they may be exposed to seawater. Or, for instance, Flint, Michigan, right? There's this huge lead crisis. Well, could we understand what the history of exposure of people is by seeing that their hair is growing about an inch a month? Can we understand from both the isotopes and the chemistry what the patterns of those exposures were? So it was kind of, some of that does not necessarily relate directly to what I'm making here, but that kind of gave me a new insight, and it made me appreciate it more.
Yeah.
And again, I want to talk about the creativity. I don't know if we can get this on camera, but
Can we get our Z-Cam in
we
here?
get our Z-Cam.
Zcam?
Yeah.
Well-
Oh, it's the Z-Cam, back from the dead.
Oh, good. So for instance, actually, if you can zoom in on this.
Yeah, come on in.
So for instance, I don't know if we can see it. Can you see that? This is the pattern I'm currently knitting. I don't know if you can see that, but it looks just like a lot of numbers and letters, right?
Can I
And-
see it? Just,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And then maybe we can zoom in on Z-Cam on the knitting here.
Yeah, and so then this is turning into this structural piece right here. And so what's interesting is this is actually, I'm knitting, this is a Stephen West pattern, and this is part of an MCAL, which again, we have our own language.
What's an MCAL?
An MCAL is a mystery knit along. So Stephen West is a prominent designer, and he makes absolutely beautiful pieces. I'll just show that again. And so right now, each week, a new clue comes out. So right now, there are at least 10,800 other people around the world that are knitting this exact same design. But everybody gets their own choice of yarns, of colors, of textures, and so there's a group called Ravelry. It's a website free to join, and so there's at least 10,800 other people who have registered on Ravelry with this pattern, currently knitting, and to see the variety and the creativity which both comes together because we're all doing it kind of as one. We don't actually know what the whole thing is going to look like. We know how many skeins we need. It is just really inspiring, and it's really amazing to see the incredible variety. A lot of posts are not even in English, but that kind of communal activity is just really pulls people together. The group I'm with also does every week. We have weekly VKNs, virtual knit nights. We also do, for instance, we have regular interviews with designers, and knitting, like any other thing, is a human activity. So all the things that are in the wider society are reflected in the knitting community. So for instance, what I'm wearing right now is this shirt, who's from somebody who is not actually, it says Skeins on it. And this is not actually another stockinette zombie. This is a different group, Adela Colvin, who is an independent dyer. And and so this is actually her daughter is named after the company. But she started her company in 2015 and has kind of exploded on the scene. You cannot get her yarns. Like, I got this shirt because I logged in 10 minutes after her update, and all of her yarns were sold out. So I bought the shirt because that's all I was left on the website. So, there's definitely that kind of collective consciousness. But one of the things, the ways she came in is she decided to become an independent dyer, because the first time she was learning to knit, this was not that long ago, it's in the 2010s, she goes into a knitting store, and she'd gone in there previously with her white neighbor to learn how to knit, and that was fine. She went in by herself, and they met her at the door and said, actually, restrooms are just for customers. And she's of African and Puerto Rican descent. And so this started, so she got very interested, and she just realized, she could dye her own yarns, and part of that creativity. And she's well known for kind of being able to promote causes. She also got involved because there's been a lot of controversy about race and gender and sexual expression and politics in knitting, as well as economics. So I think one of the things is during COVID, independent dyers can do this as a home business. And so when a lot of things were being shuttered, there was an explosion of independent dyers, incredible creativity, mostly connecting on social media. And so it's been really rewarding to see. But the other thing is there's a lot of misconceptions about what the demographics of knitting are. For instance, I'm one of the older members of my group. But in addition, there was the knitting.com controversy. So
What is this?
so
what
the-
happened on knitting.com?
Knitting.com. So there was two self-identified tech bros who had basically an investment site, and they were trying to give instruction to people about how they could make investments and make a lot of money on the net. So one of their things is they look around for undervalued websites, and they purchase them and then turn them into money-making machines. So they've done this for a whole series of things. They had one for icepacks.com, or something bizarre like that. And so what was really interesting is they actually put all of their logic publicly viewable, but they only expected like their kind of other internet tech bros to be looking at this. So they looked at maybe fly fishing, and they decided there are too many competitors. And they looked through a number of other things, and model trains. They decided the market was a little too small, so they identified knitting as the next site for where they were going to make a lot of money. So they bought the site knitting.com for $80,000, and they put this whole market plan on about how to turn it into $1 million site within a couple of years. Unfortunately, they used some very unfortunate language, like they were going to wreck the industry and that all the other competitors were unsophisticated. So let's just say the zombies on social media of knitting completely eviscerated them. And they ended up taking down all of their stuff, but and they tried to backpedal, but it was much too little too late. So there's a very strong in-group communal identity, and it can be quite vicious to those who are external.
So Gwyneth, I have to ask, you've told us a lot about sort of how knitting connects to, these very human urges that we have to connect and to create and to be a part of community. But it also seems like it's a zombifying kind of force. So how can knitting be both for humans and for zombies? I don't really understand.
Well, it kind of, one thing is, that's why I was talking about new variants of zombies, right? Because one of the things that I think with COVID-19, there was a lot of widespread cultural anxiety about all this, the loss of a lot of cultural and communication and connections. And so one of the things that it's discussed about in groups is it's great for Zoom meetings that are interminable, and you just keep this below the Zoom level of the Zoom screen. And it's almost like a fidget thing, right? But that also gets controversial because there are certain like social media tags like yarn addict, yarn porn, and those things, and that those have now been identified as problematic. that you don't want to use those language of addition of, I'm gonna, I'm on a stash fast to not add to your yarn stash, which is what that is. So again, I think it's just a microcosm of most other human experience, but it's been very interesting.
I also love how, the very act of creating these fabrics are almost like a metaphor for the connections that we can have in society.
Yeah. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
about this? So when you mentioned that there are another 10,799 people doing it at the same time,
Yes.
and this is important for you. Why is it important?
So I think in part just because it's a sense of connection to others that I would not have, and I don't necessarily know those people. But for instance, it's just a sense that other people are kind of doing the same thing, even if I'm not speaking to them.
Why? I know I'm sort of nitpicking. I was not planning for this, but why? Because it's so because most of the time when we are engaging with our social environment, we are very careful that it's a highly integrated social environment in which our friends are friends with each other. And it sounds that your membership in this group, which has a very strong positive association, doesn't require the interconnectedness. Is that correct?
So in some ways, for instance, that particular mystery knit along does not require that same interconnectedness. But some of the other things, like for instance, the stockinette zombies, you do end up getting much closer social relationships. And those end up being much more personal, but they tend to be smaller networks.
So there are small networks that are highly integrated,
Yes.
and there are these larger knitting events
Yes.
where being one of the knitters, global knitters, is where some kind of identity reformation happens.
Yes.
So is it somehow linked to what you otherwise think about the planet, or?
Yes, one of the things that a lot of people really focus on is, there are kind of big box stores for yarns, but there's actually an intense desire and interest in a very localized understanding of what particular patterns, what particular dyers, what particular yarn sources are. So you can get it's almost like you can do craft beer or any of these things. You can get very highly location specific materials. And it's, we all just need ways to kind of construct our reality and not feel quite so alone. And this is one way to kind of organize that.
Super interesting.
And I think in part because my background as analytical chemist, a lot of my world was based around the lab, and that creative outlet ends up in academic papers, but that satisfied a lot of it. But when that was not available, having a broader social connection actually became more important for me.
How did you initially get into knitting?
Let's see, gosh, it's been almost 20, 25 years. I had a friend who showed me, and I was just looking for a hobby. At that time, I was living in Connecticut, so it made a bit more sense.
Okay. I was just curious because this is going back a ways, but when you were talking about sort of anthropology and the chemistry of the different things, I was like, well, how did this zombie virus initially spread across the world? Like, I assume it was mostly just people telling friends.
Well, knitting and fiber arts they're utilitarian as well. And understanding how those husbandry practices and even migration and export of animals, including anything, goats, sheep, llamas, alpacas, any of these rabbits, these are all, they're ways to transmit culture. And that is you can almost consider that a zombie transmission of culture. But it's very, I think it's very fundamental in how we behave to societies, right? If you think about what comprises society, what makes us gather together, and having basic things like clothes. So it's not just, there are other things like crafts and things that you can have but this is just a fundamental need, right? And it's still interesting. For instance, you can get knitted fabrics all the time, but they have never actually discovered a way to mechanically and industrially create crocheted fabrics. That still requires human creation.
Uh-huh.
So when you see a crocheted garment or anything, those crocheted granny squares, sometimes they get a bad rap. That was created by hand. Still today, they still do not have a way to create that industrially.
Now, Tamas, later today, you're going to be organizing this workshop for us about sort of festivals and the natural history of festivals. How does this sort of, cultural, material culture, textiles, creation of physical things, how does that tie in with festivals and the basis of that in our humanity?
I was just thinking about exactly that.
Yeah.
There's two different paths. One is sort of an individual path, a very difficult question, and then sort of more easier of how culture is created. So, you are a scientist. Do you know? It's going to be a very odd question, yeah? Mm-hmm. What do you think is the genetic component in your hunger towards a complex pattern? Like, is this, yeah?
That's a great question. I mean, I think just like with collaging and all of these things, one thing that humans excel at for both positive and negative is finding patterns, right? And finding patterns and variation in patterns. Our brains are just wired to see patterns. Sometimes when they're not there, as in a lot of superstitions and other things. But I think that's just an inherent component.
So is this some kind of a causality-free narrative?
How do you
Well, they're not. So there's a pattern
Yeah.
that you're creating, almost as if you were telling a story, but it doesn't have the kind of causal steps a story would have. So can we ask the same complexity questions from your pattern as we can ask from a story system or a mythology?
I think you can, because actually, both patterns have histories. You can always identify where patterns originated from, what countries they were originated from, what cultures they originated from. But there's also a strong movement of pattern, both as code, as information. For instance, in the Revolutionary War, women used to knit troop movements into garments, and those would be given and they would go through because it was all in code. And actually, one of the first things when I started knitting again is I've actually I considered bringing it, but it's too large, is I started making a COVID-19 case blanket, which means I knitted for each day a square, and it's got two different colors on it, one to indicate the US case rate in COVID-19 infections, and the rest to indicate global. And so when you put all of these squares together, which now has like 1,200 squares, it's pretty large. You can see this, you can see the history of the pandemic in color and fiber. And I intentionally selected what independent dyers I wanted to both have the color complement, but there's also meaning embedded in that, as well as meaning embedded in how those squares are combined together. So I really found that so I have all these Excel charts where I'm modeling various case rates so that I can properly distribute the colors. And this is a very common thing. Every year, people make new, they might make a temperature blanket to indicate the high and low temperatures of a particular region or to illustrate particular events in someone's life. But at essential, if you think about even just the basic of knitting and purling, which are the two main stitches, those are ones and zeros. So another thing that this has been taken is, it's often derided as kind of a female occupation. But, there was another controversy where someone, looked at a pattern, and when it became a male Twitter person, and they said, oh, this is just assembly language. Look, women can code. And yeah, so there's a whole nother topic.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah, we have a question from the audience here. What is Neil Smith doing right now? I'm curious what Neil Smith is doing right now. Our illustrator. Oh, we got the Z-cam on Neil. What is Neil doing at the moment? Oh, it's a little.
Can we push in a little closer to the
It's
screen
actually
there?
impossible to see because of
I
the
think-
glare
I think
happening.
We just put the Z-cam right
Neil,
there.
can you tell us what you're doing? Maybe really loudly.
Just about. Well, there's definitely.
Oh yeah, we can't.
There
Oh.
are some cults developing within this apocalypse, and so I've got this idea about our two potential cult leaders who are kind of they're rivals really. So I quite like the idea of them being joined by the brain. They're both zombified by the leadership race, but I've managed to get a bit of ick and a bit of goo. A bit of brain goo into my illustration here, so when it's done, I'll post it.
Wow, Dave, how do you feel about this?
Oh, I mean, I love the picture. I think it's fantastic, but it also makes me think it'd be great if we could get that knit. Oh.
That's aspirational. Or maybe not.
Maybe knit it each day to see who has more followers.
Well, it'd be really easy to do knitting patterns, so maybe we could start a knitting group.
Yeah,
There we
I
go.
think our cult needs a knitting group because our cult is about chaos and there's secret messages written into blankets, and so I think knitting. Get that banner off the screen. Nobody wants the cult of caring. That's the evil cult.
Dave, this isn't a platform for you to recruit for your cult.
It's not a platform for Liz to recruit for the other cult either. So you guys should totally
Dave. This is neither the place nor the time for you to recruit for your cult.
Okay, well, we'll figure out when the time is, and then you guys should join. So, and then we could all knit together, and we can make collages. It would be awesome.
Yes.
So,
Knitting populism.
yeah. So, I mean, well, actually, the question I was going to ask was sort of what was the most sort of anti-establishment thing you'd ever seen, or the most sort of powerful thing you'd ever seen knit. But you had some pretty good examples. So, were there any others?
Well, I mean, especially on Ravelry, they popularized the pussy hats in a lot of the protests. Is all those, there were a whole plethora of free knitting patterns to inspire people.
Interesting. So, and then I have one more question. Everybody around the world who knits, for the most part, if they're part of this online knitting community, do they use that same code that you're using, more or less? Is that?
Generally, yes, they would all pretty much what that is.
So you have your sort of secret international
Yeah.
language of knitting?
I mean, older patterns from a long time ago, sometimes they differed, but there has been a convergence, kind of a unification of the zombie horde to one central code.
Interesting.
I'm worried about a zombie situation. I'll be right back.
Oh my gosh. All right. So hopefully she's okay.
So in your collages, do you ever use fabric pieces, or is it mostly two-dimensional textural, or what kind of materials?
Yeah, it hasn't been 3D, but I'm so intrigued at this point about a space to maybe mix those. I'm sure there must be some folks who collage with 3D, but I've yet to get into it. But I'm really so moved by your discussion of knitting and what that means. I mean, really thinking through the politics of knitting, what's political about it, the political messages through the knitting. My mind is blown on the mystery knit. I mean, it goes back to our earlier conversation about the need to play and the collective play necessary to build something new.
Yeah.
That there would be 10,000 people willing to put their trust in the pattern that is going to be released, right? I mean, that's trust, no? So I'm going to commit to this project and collectively participate. What does that mean for one's own place in the world to know that there are 10,000 other people engaged in the same project? It takes me back to our discussion of the sandbox, the dispersed sandbox.
And this sort of idea of these friendships, right? These sort of like, I'm trying to think, they're almost like passing ship friendships where like that you have like during in a lot of online communities, like if you happen to write a wiki that somebody else happens to write, you know what I mean? Or like these people you might never see, but you sort of share in this project. It's a really interesting.
One of the things, so it occurs to me from what you're saying, is that part of my work is trying to see how the society changes when the family goes away, when fertility falls, and we move into cities, and we migrate away from our kin network, or the kin network is never there, and then friendship. If you replace the missing kin with friendship, then what we see is that this interconnectedness of the society goes down. All okay?
Okay.
Everything's totally fine.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I can't find Baba though. Baba
You
Ring.
can't find Baba?
I can't find Baba, but
Now, wasn't he over near the Zcam operator when that incident occurred?
I'm just really hoping that he's still with us in one way or another, and that he'll be able to join us in a few minutes for the end of the show. But
All right. Yeah. Otherwise, Tamas, it's on you. You're gonna have to sing. So the songs you've been singing for your kids. All right, we'll do it. So,
yeah. But I'm pretty sure that in 5 or 10 minutes he'll be back. I mean, I really hope so. I really hope that he'll join us. But maybe Gwyneth, before Baba comes on, I'm sure he'll be back. This whole question of is it zombie or human? Are we zombie or human? I mean, you say that you're a zombie, but you really don't look like a zombie to me. Are we thinking about zombies in the wrong way?
I think so, because I think you can have variants in which there's almost a melding of zombie and human, right? That there are certain aspects of zombies. We focus on the negatives so much, right? But there are positives, right? That communal goal toward one activity, such as brains, getting more brains, and that there's usually, typically between zombies, there's very little conflict, right? Because they have a centralized, unified goal. Now they're very in network, right? They're highly aggressive toward outside networks. But if you could ameliorate that particular aspect, there's a lot of good that can come out of it, I think. So
that's why my zombies.com idea never got off the ground. The zombies, they didn't like me there.
well, you probably promoted it wrong.
I probably did. I probably
Yeah.
should have gone in as one of them, right? So,
Well, knitting.com, you tried to say, oh yes, I have a connection to the knitting community because my 6-year-old is learning to knit. And that did not go over well.
it did not.
No, so you have to have a little bit more skin in the game, even if it's between your teeth.
Thank you, Gwyneth. Well, I'm gonna go and see if I can find Baba.
Okay, should we just
Again,
keep
just
talking
keep-
about friendship?
Keep
Okay.
everything going here while
So-
I
So I have.
Sorry.
find Baba.
But what I wanted to say is that if friendship, the integratedness of the network goes away. If we pick our friends randomly, and in this similarity-based friendship choice, like homophily-based friendship choice, it's almost like a network building technology that increases the integratedness of our social network, in which we pick particular traits. Obviously, we have an infinite set of traits, and societies pick different kinds of traits. or they choose in which the similarity is measured. Sometimes it's something that's physiological to us. Sometimes, of course, that's most problematic because you can't shed it. But sometimes it's whether you're into Mozart or into Nicki Minaj, another marker. Yeah? So I wonder whether this process that we're doing, in a way, is inventing a trait in which similarity is possible.
I was wondering that also, especially with COVID, right? Because you were saying as the families got smaller, friendships became more important. Then when COVID hit, friendships were harder to maintain.
Yeah.
And I noticed, so myself, I got really into music and chess, both of which have a secret language. Like that looks very similar to what you're going to see for a chess game, right? And I was wondering, is there an appeal when you lose these other forms of friendship? Does the secret language of friendship become more valuable?
So almost the presence of a complex language is a cost of an entry cost to the friendship, and hence leaving it. See, in economics, in market expanding the market, this would be the cost of entering the market, and it makes the market more stable because you don't want to leave because you've already had that up front. Is that what you're meaning? That the more complex it is, that you sort of have this upfront cost into the kind of trait.
Right, into the group, right?
Into the
it's sort
group,
of or it possibly could be a signal of sort of shared background of some sort, even if it's with a person from a completely different,
We are going to talk about in the workshop. We're going to talk about how sometimes when we give some kind of psychological pain, can be a physiological pain, for instance, or a gift, a psychologically costly gift, something that's difficult to produce. When we give this to a community, we become bonded to the community by the act of giving it. It's an oxytocin-based bonding. So, is this what's going on in you? That you are creating almost? Are you giving these creations to the community in a? Do you perceive it as a gift to the community?
Yes, and in fact, there's a whole discussion about who is knit worthy, meaning worthy of providing to a knit thing. And there's even the note of the curse of the boyfriend sweater, which you knit a sweater for a boyfriend, and then of course they leave. But it's really deciding like what is this? Because a knit garment takes a substantial amount of time and can take significant money. It's a representation of what that friendship means, right? So it's both economic and also familial. And I've definitely seen how when I've gifted a garment to someone else, that definitely has a really strengthening impact because it is also an emotion. It indicates an emotional investment in that relationship.
Something in you or in the recipient of the gift, or both?
It can be both. It can be both. I know that, for instance, last year I was knitting a lot of miniature sweaters. They're about this big. They're very cute, by the way. And I gave those, and I noticed I ended up making quite a few of them, and I gave them to some people I was close to and some people I was less close to. And I have seen that those have ended up bringing the people who are not as close much closer together. And they have clearly, for instance, they've placed them in locations which indicate that they hold them in some value. And so it is also definitely a way in which you can mediate these online relationships, but through, you can also send these things as physical items. And so I think it's really interesting to think about the ways in which that changes as these networks change.
So I haven't been able to find Baba yet, but I found our Zcam operator, and I've asked our Zcam operator to go looking for
Is he alive?
Baba. So our Zcam operator is okay. Zcam operator, have you been able to find Baba? Where's Baba? Is Baba around here somewhere?
Baba,
Baba.
are you okay?
Baba.
I got here with my life barely intact. There was a bit of a commotion backstage, a lot of teeth, a lot of blood.
Oh.
But
Oh my gosh.
but
Are you okay?
I'm okay. I've managed to dodge it. I'm unscathed. And I was listening to the conversation, and I deemed it knit-worthy. So I've taken all the various strands of the various ideas and concepts and research that everyone's talked about, and I've made an original wrap, which I'd love to share with you guys.
Amazing.
Yeah. So
Baba. Absolutely.
this is my lyrical knit garment for this specific group. So let's drop a beat, see if it comes through, and rock the studio audience. Yeah. Check it out, DJ iPhone in the house. All right. I'll tell a story about what I just experienced too. It was like, whoa. Cameraman, blood on the floor, death of the Z-Cam, apocalyptic zombie attacks. It's gotta be Zan. Bring the facts if you want to make the zombies mad. When you're nothing but a human meat sack, it's gotta be Zan. In a dark room, a haunted house, right? You gotta survive an assault and embrace chaos. You can thrive in a cult with Dave Lundberg Kendrick, a cult of pure chaos. The restoration of in his Hungarian accent that was so charming. Why indeed, Gwyneth, do you insist on having a knitting army? 10,000 integrated foot soldiers just sitting, knitting. Affiliations create a web, Tamas. You don't need to nitpick it. Same as me when I rap on beats. It's not a factory, it's a local connection to everyone striving for mic mastery. From the freshest novice to veteran masters of rap fabric, lyricism gives me a sense of collective satisfaction. I work on it until I master it, scientifically accurate. Maybe I get a bit of help from Athena Activist, bringing scientific acumen into the rap business. Everyone has got to connect. That's where the action is, weaving rhymes that'll beat back the zombie masses. As sharp as machetes and soft as the backs of alpacas. Humans are hungry for patterns like zombies are hungry for brains. So get into the music and with the knitting patterns, get it trained. But wait, cameraman, blood on the floor, death of the Z-Cam, apocalyptic zombie attacks. It's gotta be Zan. Bring facts if you want to make the zombies mad. When you're nothing but a human meat sack, it's gotta be Zan. Cameraman, blood on the floor, zombie attacks, getting beat back. Where are we? It's gotta be Zan. Bring facts if you want to put the zombies back. When you're just a human meat sack, it's gotta be Zan. It's gotta be Zan. Brand new.
We're so happy that you are alive and with us, and that you are bringing the lyricism to the zombie apocalypse. So thank you. You want to come in here with us? Here, why don't we stand, y'all? Let's stand.
Take a knee.
Stand. We got this. Yeah,
All right. Really great to be here. It was a lot of fun to follow the
Yeah.
conversation.
absolutely. So what do you think of the zombie apocalypse situation? You were just backstage and you had a situation with the zombies.
Well, there was an attack. There was some blood on the floor. There was a cameraman who somehow managed to get back up. I'm not sure what's going on in his brain. He may be infected. But you know, my takeaway from the first moments of it was, here's an opportunity for human solidarity to flourish under some kind of external attack that we can all, you know, band together against. So I hope we overcome some differences
Yeah,
during this.
I hope so too. I mean, maybe the zombie threat is not completely gone. I know we began by reassuring you all that we don't have a zombie situation, but maybe we do have a zombie situation, but perhaps it's a zombie situation we can figure out how to
Manageable zombie
manage.
situation.
And
Well, the COVID variants have all started changing, right? They're more infective, but sometimes less harmful. And I wonder if some of the zombification variants are also doing the same thing.
You think there's long zombie as well?
I think there definitely is. Yes.
Well, this was exciting.
Yeah.
I mean,
So we have some other great things coming up this afternoon too.
so the first thing
Yeah.
is Tamas's creativity workshop, right?
Yeah, festivals.
Festival.
and
That's
right.
Natural history of festivals. So yeah,
So-
Tamas, do you want to say a word or two about what we can expect?
Yeah, I mean, we are going to project, we're going to go through some possible interpretation of where the different elements of bringing a community together in a festival, but rather than projecting in a PowerPoint, we're going to project inside us. And we're going to push our own buttons and we're going to watch ourselves inside. So we'll go through a journey. It's a bit of an emotional journey because we're going to try to push the buttons. If it works, we're going to have emotions. But at the end, we might have some insight into a little bit of where some of the foundations of festivals or food sharing, sacrifice, music together, saunas, and steam tents and so on come from. So that's what we're going to try to do.
Wonderful. Well, Tamas, maybe we should let you go so you can get ready
Right.
for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much
being
for
here
having me.
with us.
Thank
on
you.
the
That's
show.
amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. and Mzilikazi,
Yes.
we have our DJ reggae zombie history coming
That's
up
right.
as well.
That's
so
right.
looking forward to that.
Very much so. Unfortunately, for those watching, you won't be able to see it, but maybe there's a way we can share our reggae resistance playlist that we will be enjoying and vibing and dancing to later today.
Yeah, and we will have some clips that we'll be able to share probably
Right.
from the event.
At
So
the start, hey,
absolutely.
you can dance and resist at home. So join us.
Yeah.
That's right.
Send us your clips of you
Yeah.
dancing at home.
That's right.
Yeah. Mzilikazi, thanks so much for
Thank
being
you.
with us
Thank you
here.
so much.
Thank you. This is
And
wonderful.
I have to thank you for that beautiful,
Oh.
beautiful music. Thank you. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank
entirely.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Gwyneth, unbelievable having you here. And I hope that we'll get to see more of your knitting and your unbelievable interweaving of science and all the arts. So thank you so much.
Thank
and,
you very
and
much
also
for having
the
me.
interweaving of zombies and humans. I think you bring a really important perspective. So thank you so
Well,
much
thank
for
you.
being here with us, Gwyneth. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for that wrap.
Well, why don't the three of us sit down for a few minutes before we finish out the show? So,
All right.
uh,
Got some real estate suddenly.
Yeah.
yeah,
Welcome.
here we are. So Baba, you make science wraps. That's your whole. Is that your whole life now?
It is making science wraps, and it is also representing other artists that do assignment-based rap. So take on a topic, make a catchy track about it, maybe a video, or show up live at an event where it is topical and relevant to everybody in the audience. That's the concept. So yeah, I've been doing science rap myself for about 15 years almost, and trying to franchise it a bit.
That's awesome.
So how did you get into that?
My background is I did a master's in comparative literature,
Okay.
and I wrote a rap adaptation of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales
All right.
as part of, well, it wasn't really officially part of my thesis. It was like a side project, but I was touring around the UK performing that from
sort of 2004 to 2008. A biologist saw me do that, and he literally said, "Do you think you could do for Darwin what you did for Chaucer?"
Oh, wow.
So it was kind of a challenge put to me, like help people understand the origin of species as a text and what it was arguing for and how it's relevant to our understanding of biology and psychology and culture and all kinds of academic disciplines today. And so I wrote a show called The Rap Guide to Evolution. It was a totally transformative experience because I learned a ton and took the perspective into my life, and also like discovered things about rap and how it works as an art form that I had never thought of before. You know, natural selection of tracks in our playlists and all the differential survival stuff that makes culture work, and stayed with science communication ever since.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, and then in terms of rap, had you done any rapping before the Canterbury Tales rap?
Yeah, I think I started rapping maybe 18 or 19, which is relatively late.
Uh-huh.
You know, I was already midway through a college degree, a big rap fan. And for me, I think it was like I'm studying all these dead white poets,
Uh-huh.
and I'm listening to all these live, mostly African-American rappers. And I kind of had like a similar hunger for both, you know, rhymed storytelling, Chaucer, Shakespeare, William Blake, John Donne. And then it's like Biggie, Nas, Tupac, you know, Black Star, The Roots. And at a certain point I had this aha moment where I was like, it's kind of all the same thing in a way. It's like rhymes, stylized storytelling, interpretations of the culture, criticisms of, you know, injustice and hypocrisy and hierarchy. And, you know, there's an activist component to a lot of old literature as well, like calling out the fakers. And so I ended up like writing my thesis connecting hip hop with medieval and Renaissance English literature, and started rapping around the same time.
Oh, we probably have to go, but one last question. Looking forward, do you think there's sort of a way, we've talked about how these knitting groups, these online knitting groups were changing the art forms and things like this. Do you feel like, how do you feel technology is going to change the rap art form?
Honestly, like while I was listening to Gwyneth with the sort of power of the knitting groups, and the kind of local attention to craftsmanship as something that scales up from individual connections, I was really thinking that is a transformation I would love to see happen in the rap game. Not just a big Drake and a big Kanye and, you know, millions of unheard of people, but more of like a rap middle class where people are doing it locally, entertaining their communities and their cities. Maybe some of them get famous, but just more support for the art form at the grassroots without the only gold standard being platinum sales, and really making it, you know, more accessible to everybody and for fun and for the art.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We only have a few minutes left in the show, and I have to ask, how can rap, and especially sort of, you know, raps, like using rap as a tool for communication, help us through this apocalyptic moment that we're in right now, and, you know, and dealing with all these forms of zombification, both literal and figurative, that we are encountering. I mean, just trying to, you know, have this production happen here in the studio.
Yeah, well, I think we've all got to sharpen the tools that we've got in the post-apocalyptic survival mode. People will bring different talents to the table, and one thing rap is kind of a technology for getting ideas into brains, or for getting memes into brains. And, you know, it started as this competitive street culture of like, throw your hands in the air, wave them like you just don't care. And, you know, whoever was the most entertaining on the mic and connected with the crowd got more invitations from DJs to rock the crowd. And I am an inheritor of this tradition of highly effective emotional button pushing techniques that rappers have. You know, rhymes, punchlines, metaphors, the syncopation, the call and response. And so, you know, it's a little bit message agnostic. You can spread bad messages and good ones, but once you have the techniques and, you know, you're dedicated to using the force for good, I think we can spread good ideas, good memes, and sort of positive zombification with rap. That's what I hope to do.
Yeah. Is there almost a sort of meme war situation going on where good memes and bad memes are battling it out in our heads?
Yes, this apocalypse is a battle for consciousness, and you know, the forces of light have to win. So that's where I see rap playing a role.
So also, and speaking of having to win, the cult of chaos has to win. We're the force of light, and the cult of
Dave, this is not a platform for you to recruit for your cult?
Battling
Oh.
rap anthems for each cult, maybe?
Sure, yeah. Just as long as ours is better. Well, no, it's not. But if it was, anybody could come talk to me or Neil about joining the cult. So, and it's fun. We have a song. So,
Well, we'll see what Baba thinks of your song.
all right.
Yeah. Baba, in terms of rap as this medium for communication, is rap itself, does it zombify us? Is that a problem for, it as a tool to help fight the zombie apocalypse, or is that a benefit to it?
Well, I think we just need to embrace that memes and culture zombify us to a certain degree at all times. You're going to have some earworms. You're going to have some preoccupations. You're going to have some sort of attentional magnetism. And one thing I'm enamored of science for is that it draws us towards like effective medical treatments, public health interventions, effective ways of building technology, ways of sorting out superstition and myth from what's going to work. Doesn't always work perfectly, but I think it's a good sort of meme complex to share using rap. And, once you've embraced the fact that there's no such thing as thought that's independent of culture, the best you can do is try to engineer culture in ways that produce greater well-being and health and happiness for the surviving humans in the apocalypse. So, that's my attitude towards it.
Great. Thank you so much, Baba.
Yeah, this was great.
Yeah. Well, I think before we go, we should probably talk a little bit about what's happening tonight and tomorrow. We have an Undead or a late night brains tonight at 8:00. We'll be hearing from Baba again.
And don't we also have a launch?
No, we don't have a late night brains tonight. We're launching our podcast tonight.
Yeah,
season
come on.
4.
Yes.
Season 4 of Zombified launches tonight. So that's going to be happening at 8 p.m.
And is that going to be here? Where does that take
is going
place?
to be here, I
All
believe.
right, cool.
That's where we're setting up the sound.
And is that going to be live streamed?
It
So
is gonna
people
be
can
live
watch it? So
streamed,
check that out,
absolutely.
8:00.
Yes.
So yeah, and who are we going to have there? It's not just you and me, right?
It's you and me and Mzilikazi Koné.
You guys may remember her from
and
today's
Tamas
show, and you may remember
and
Tamas
Baba.
from today's show, and
Yes.
you may remember Baba from today's show.
But we will be
Yeah,
we'll be talking
so-
about the next season of Zombified. Which do you remember the theme?
The theme is refusing to die, which I think of as not just us refusing to die as individuals, but also as a society refusing to just roll over and die.
Absolutely.
Instead. Yeah.
So we'll look forward to seeing you all there
Yeah.
tonight. And thank you all so much for being here with us. Baba, thank you for sharing your delicious brains with us. And thank you all for joining us for this edition of Undead Live on Channel Z. Now,
Oh, yeah.
Remember, the best way to protect those delicious brains in the zombie apocalypse is to share them. So we'll see you here next time on Undead Live. And here we have the apocalypse covered.
And if the whole world says that we're crazy,